Chapter 4. Rhys. Alpha? One of the border guards knocked on my door. I raised an eyebrow at him. Yes? What is it and why aren't you at your post? He bared his neck. I am sorry to bother you, Alpha, but there is a woman here and she is asking to meet you. I stared at him. Is she part of the pack? Tell her that I am not taking meetings today. He shook his head. She's not part of the pack, Alpha. She's human? Human? I questioned. Send her away. She's probably just a lost tourist. He shook his head again. She's very adamant and... I raised an eyebrow and... Spit it out, Jensen. She has the mark of an alpha. Chapter 5. Kassi. My little brother gripped my hand as we hiked up to our grandfather's house. Don't worry, buddy, I gave him a reassuring smile. Everything will be alright. He put his thumb in his mouth and nodded. My heart melted. No matter what happened here, I vowed to protect my brother. Although he was 9 years old, he was still smaller than normal 9-year-olds. This made me 10x more protective over him. At his old school, whenever someone tried to bully him, I threatened them to the point where they went home crying. My parents used to call me their little she-wolf because I was so protective over him, like he was my little cub. A couple of minutes we were standing in front of the biggest house I've ever seen. Scratch that. It was more like a mansion instead of a house. Much bigger than our apartment in New York. When I turned to Aries, he had his mouth open. He went to take a step forward when I grabbed his should. I bent down to his height and he looked at me with his cute brown eyes. Aries, while we're here, I want you to tell me everything you experience. Can you do that, buddy? Sure, sissy, I'll tell you about my day. His eyes brightened. I smiled. And tell me if you feel uncomfortable in this house. If you do, we'll leave. Promise. He gave me a crooked smile, one that would surely charm the girls when he's older. You think Grandpa will like us? He asked. I ruffled his hair. He would be an idiot not to have grinned. Race you to the front door. He squealed and took off. I tried to run after him, but the movement of the curtains in the living room caught my attention. Neener, Aries teased. I won. I rolled my eyes and walked to the front door before ruffling his hair. Yes, you did squirt. He knocked on the door excitedly. After a minute of no one answering, I rang the doorbell. After 5 minutes of no one answering, we frowned and I pounded on the door. I thought Mama told him we were coming? Aries spoke around his thumb. She did. I started yelling, hello? Is anyone home? Stop all that hollering, girl, a deep voice said from behind us. Both Aries and I jumped before he hit behind my leg. If he's out here, then who was in the house a second ago? I thought. The man in his late 60s had silver hair, wore a flannel, and dark Levi jeans. He was a tall man and not the type of person I was expecting to be my grandfather. His demeanor was cold and uninviting, the opposite of my mother. I wouldn't be hollering if you answered your door. His lips thinned. I suppose you're Carrie's kids? I raised an eyebrow. He wouldn't even address us as his grandkids, let alone my mom as his own daughter. Yes, we are. He looked us over. I stood protectively in front of my brother when I saw the look of disapproval in my grandfather's face. He looked at us before nodding his head toward the house. Follow me. Aries grasped my leg tighter and I patted the top of his head with a fine buddy. He nodded but continued to suck his thumb. The old man opened his door and my mouth dropped open in horror. His whole living room was filled with animals. Dead and stuffed wolves, to be exact. I felt Aries shaking nervously. What the hell? I muttered, knowing damn well that the old man heard me. He pointed to the left, kitchens through that way. He then pointed to the right, my study and workshop is that way. If I'm not in the study, chances are that I'm in the workshop. I shivered. The second floor is the guest rooms. Pick whichever room that suits you. Stay off the third floor. He started to stalk away before pausing. Word of the wise, stay out of the woods. Sometimes I like to practice my shooting out there. He went to the right, probably to his evil workshop to torture helpless animals. Come on, bud, I urged Aries up the stairs. Let's go unpack. Thy broken bar, thy broken bar, thy broken bar. Hey guys, first author's note of this book. I know I've been lacking with posting Chapter 6. Thioethawethio. I stood up as I smelled the unfamiliar smell on the opposite of my door. Come in, I said. The door opened and I saw my guard standing there with a blonde woman who looked at me with a blank expression. I waved my guard away and he bared his neck to me before closing the door. The woman and I stared at each other until she spoke up. You're so grown up now. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? The woman smiled slightly. I think it would be best if you called your parents. My spine stiffened and I stood to my full height. I don't know who you are and why you're was, and I realized my mouth was hanging open in disbelief. She smiled faintly. I believe it would be best if your parents were here. Maybe they can help me explain things better. I cleared my throat and called my parents' landline. My mom answered on the second ring. Hey baby boy, she chirped. Hi mom, I replied, keeping the woman in my sight. Mom, I need you and dad to come to my office. Why? She sounded confused. Because. I looked at the women. There's someone here that wants to talk to you. Who is it? I don't know how, but the woman heard my mom's question. Tell her about the time when she nearly peed her pants after she and her best friend got lost in the woods, the women said quietly. I relayed the message to my mom and she remained quiet the whole time. I thought the line went dead before I heard a girly squeal and the click of the phone disconnecting. About 5 minutes later, my office door burst open and my mom attacked the woman. I took a step forward, ready to pull them apart, when I realized that my mom wasn't attacking the woman. They were jumping up and down excitedly. A minute later, my father walked into the room with a big smile on his face. I can't believe you're here, Mom cried. It's been too long. The woman sniffled. I know, Emmy, I'm sorry. Mom dried her tears and hugged the woman tighter before stepping back. A second later, my father took my mother's place and hugged the woman also. I was fed up with not knowing what was happening. Can someone tell me what is going on here? Who is she and how do you two know her? Well son, this is Carrie Dimitriou. He smiled. Your mother's best friend. And your godmother, Mom added. If it wasn't for Carrie, I don't think you'd be here right now. She introduced your father to me. The woman, Carrie, nodded. But that still doesn't explain what she's doing here or how she has that. I pointed at the Alpha's mark on her neck. A royal Alpha's mark. A mark that hasn't been seen in a long time. Carrie is the Alpha female to the royal pack, Dad explained. Her husband is the Prince of Wolves. Speaking of him? Mom said excitedly. Where is Nico? And your daughter? Carrie tried to smile but then tears filled her eyes. Care Bear? Mom asked in concern. What's wrong? I have a son now, Carrie added, looking at the floor. He's gonna be 10 soon. And Cassie's so beautiful. She has Nick's eyes. That's great, Carrie, but why are you crying? Mom frowned. Realization dawned on my father's face. Honey, I don't think Carrie wants to talk. Mom waved him off and continued to stare at her best friend. Carrie, what aren't you telling me? Carrie finally looked at my mother. Mom gasped when she saw tears streaming down her best friend's face. She immediately rushed to her, and that's when the strongest Alpha female in the world broke down. I've heard stories of the royal pack. They were descendants of the first created wolves and were known to be the strongest, fastest, and smartest. Unfortunately, these attributes led to jealousy among other packs, which led to most of the family being hunted down. Rumors S. Chapter 8. Rhys. I cursed as I tried to tie the stupid tie. After the 5th attempt, I just let it hang around my neck and slammed my locker door. Rai, I groaned when I heard that high-pitched giggle. Marcy, I faked a smile. How are you? She giggled more and brought me closer to her by pulling the ends of my untied tie. I'm fine, handsome. How are you? She purred. I stepped back and pulled my tie out of her hands. She pouted. What do you need, Marcy? I asked in irritation before looking at my watch. Great, I still had 10 minutes left with this annoying little girl. Now was that harsh? Yeah, but I had a reason for being harsh. About 1.5 years ago, after I realized that my mate was not coming anytime soon, I decided to go on a date with this girl that was a friend of a friend's. This was probably the biggest mistake of my life. Not only did I have a horrible time, I also gained a stalker. Ever since that day, she thought we were a couple and that she was the next Alpha female. Lately, she's been extra crazy. She's been telling everyone and anyone that would listen that we were getting married soon. Another female couldn't even look at me without her getting psycho. She wolf on me. If there's nothing you need, Marcy, I have to get going. But Rhys? She whined. I want to spend time with you. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Or do you want to brag about that fantasy you have about being my mate? She pouted even more. Rai, that's not true. I am your mate. The psycho tried to kiss me but I dodged her and walked down the hall. As soon as I turned the corner, I smelled a sweet smell and caught something soft.